All right. Bismillah. So today, inshallah, we'll talk about, again, professional development, and we'll focus more on a few items that are more practical. How can we come up with some steps uh, for job hunting or for career development in general? To get the best out of this seminar here, or webinar, you really want to apply some of what we're talking about today sooner than later. So, preferably by like tomorrow. So that it helps, retain in your head, and then, we can always follow up. But there will be a couple of activities we'll do towards the end, and I'll be happy if you want to send anything over email after this discussion to look it over with you, and we can talk about it, inshallah. Because of the nature of this type of topic, it's hard to do a lot of hands-on activities here, but we'll have a few brainstorming discussions, inshallah. All right, so this is the third of the 4 modules of From Crisis to Opportunity. We talked about the self-leadership, ourselves, our qualities, specifically taqwa and sabr, and we discussed that in module 1, and how we want to build a strong foundation in ourselves that would help us build strong households. We talked about the concept of qawama 2 weeks ago, and some other key areas of responsibility, accountability, some other traits of leadership that pertain to household leaders. Today, inshallah, will be more on professional development, and then inshallah next week will be for young people as well as their parents on how teenagers can become an active component of a society by introducing some impact, and transformation in their communities. So today we're going to talk about 4 key items, some changes in employment models over the time. How do we assess our own viability as far as being employed, and our position in the career map. Some basics of career planning. Really, we're talking here about vision and mission. And then we'll talk about some practical steps for job hunting, for changing jobs, or for looking for a new opportunity, or changing even domains or industries, inshallah. Right. If at any point you have a question, feel free to jump in. I mean, there's such a small group today. Or you can also use the chat function. So I'll be checking it once in a while. But again, by all means, feel free to kind of jump in and just ask your question right away. All right, so as a start, let's brainstorm a little bit. What's the, let's kind of come up with differences and similarities between a job versus a career, and just have this as an open discussion. So I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts. What's a job and what's a career? How are they similar or how are they different? Any thoughts?
So job may be something with a short-term vision, not with a long-term vision wrapped around. Both are hopefully paid effort, but career is more of a like a long-term thinking of based on personal interest or professional interest. But job is something temporary without a long-term vision.
Okay. Jazakallah khair. Sister Fathia, I think you were about to say something as well.
I do have the same idea what the brother mentioned. Like, career is more professional. You are expertise in that area. Job is any person can enter it, like without any much prerequisite, something like that.
Okay. All right, Jazakallah khairan for sharing. Yumna, did you have any thoughts? You may be muted. All right, so those are good thoughts. I think, the key thing here is career is a long-term picture. It's the whole professional life, if you will. Whereas job is one specific phase or point in that career. They both, like Brother Muhammad said, could be paid. Jobs sometimes would be unpaid. Typically, they're both paid, but again, not necessarily. You can have someone who has a career in community building, let's say, but they have another career in law, like might be a person who's an attorney. He or she goes to court every day, you know, defending people in cases or presenting their clients, but they could also have a career in community building. They're active in their masjid, for example, and it might be unpaid. But I think the biggest differentiator is that a job is just one slice of the career. The career is the longer, bigger picture, longer term, bigger picture. It kind of is the full story of the professional life of that individual, whereas a job is a bunch of tasks. You know, it's a group of tasks that are done at a particular point in time. So what a lot of people do is they focus on the job picture, the job vision, rather than the career vision. So we're looking for a job, we're looking for an income, we're looking for something to do to pay the bills or whatever it is, versus looking at a career. And this kind of is not necessarily with a certain segment or group of the population. You know, it's observed with youth who are finishing college or high school. It's observed with experienced professionals who've been working for 20, 30 years, and everyone in between. It really comes down to how focused are we in, you know, our perspective about our careers and professional lives. And sometimes circumstances make us focus so much on a job. I remember just a couple of weeks ago, or maybe three, a brother probably in his upper 20s, he had just completed his master's degree right after his bachelor's, so he's probably in his upper 20s. He reached out on LinkedIn, and he was asking about employment opportunities in the DC area. He's a mechanical engineer in the Midwest. He's looking to relocate to the DC area, and his question was, what's the job market like in the DC area, and do you know anyone who is looking for a mechanical engineer with interest in innovation, right? So that's his kind of, he did a master's degree in innovation management and systems engineering. And that's an example of someone or a case where the focus is on the job rather than the career. So I asked him a few questions to know him better. We connected on LinkedIn. He's a Muslim brother, and he had started a couple of businesses that didn't go very well because of the pandemic, and they were just starting out. One was an export business. So he wanted to export certain types of packages and goods to the Middle East, where he came from to study here in this country. And he rented a warehouse. He did some partnerships with a couple of logistics companies and things like that. So he had that kind of accomplishment in one area. And he also started a small type of business with websites and things like that. And on top of that, he worked as an employee at a company. So when we spoke a little bit, you know, I brought to his attention, why are you focused on a job rather than a career? It seems you have an idea what you want to be doing, which is, you know, technology, innovation, management, but you're searching for a job versus searching for a career. And it makes a big difference in how we approach opportunities, how we apply for jobs, how we apply for the next step, how we're looking at things. If we're very focused on a job, we can lose sight of the bigger picture and waste a lot of valuable resources and time in securing that next step. So inshallah, I hope today we can keep that in mind, because it's going to make our efforts when we're looking for another opportunity much easier, much more efficient, and actually enjoyable, rather than
It's so delicious.
there's a question?
My apology.
No problem. Rather than a boring activity that we're kind of forced to do because we need to move on. All right, so moving on, one quick thing about employment models. Back in the day, after World War II, really, the employment or the labor market took a certain perspective. Unions started out, and even before that, you know, unions were around. But it became the more structured employment, the 8 to 5, people get paid a fixed, or not a fixed, but a salary that's sort of consistent and sort of guaranteed. The markets were high growth. You had the steel industry, you had, manufacturing, and then you had the early days of information technology. And these were all high growth markets, and people would join a company and sit there for 25, 30, 40 years and get their pension or retirement. And they had some nice, good benefits and whatnot. And for employers, it was a good thing because they had employee loyalty. The turnover was low, which means the need for retraining and recruitment was not as high. So there was a good return on investment. They would invest in their employees, they would invest in the retirement and so forth. But then what happened as global competition increased and outsourcing increased, and now, especially in this country, companies are competing with counterparts or competitors across the globe where labor is cheaper and so forth. The markets didn't have necessarily the same growth. And on top of that, the world has become more connected and more, internet and access to data and connectivity and communications become more pervasive. So people are no longer interested in long-term employment, 20, 30-year type of thing. And some markets or some industries changed very quickly because of the nature of these industries, like information technology. Almost every 3, maybe 2 years, you get new generation of technology that changes very quickly, and people need to adapt and learn new things to stay, employable or valuable. Hence, you found that people are looking more for a job for now rather than, a longer term job for life type of thing. And this slide comes from Manpower, as you can see at the bottom there. People are even thinking that we're moving to even a more dynamic market where employers and employees are very correlated in their value. So in the past, you have a huge company, a multi-billion-dollar multinational, organization that has 100,000 employees. I mean, you think about that's almost the population of some small countries. And the company receives its value from its brand and from its products and services. Today, that's not necessarily the case. The company receives its value from the people that work for it, from the employees that go there. And similarly, the employees gain their value from their attachment to that type of company. And it's a company that has high growth, high innovation, high dynamics, and it's constantly changing. And we have some big examples of those types of companies around us today. They've taken over the complete market. So for example, you look at the retail industry, all these retailers, the big names of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, they're gone. And today you have new players in that market, but they're not retailers. They're more technology innovators. They're new business models being introduced. They are providing crowd employment for small people to open online shops and stores and be importers and exporters of goods and so forth. So the dynamics are changing. It's a relationship where I have to contribute something for you to benefit as an employer, but also the employee has to bring a return on that investment. And the models are changing. Facebook is an example. Facebook can be seen, or Uber or Amazon. These are all new types of relationships with their quote unquote employees who might not even be working for them. People who put content on Facebook, they do the exact same thing that an employee does for a content development or media company, which is they post information, but they don't get paid for it. But how do they get compensated if they want to? Is by leveraging that platform to run a business or to introduce a service where they can get compensated from the market. So it's a very different dynamic. the world is becoming more just like crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, and crowd working as well. So moving on, these are some of the in-demand roles in the country today. This comes from, again, Manpower, the top 10 areas. Healthcare has become one of those hot areas for various reasons, not just because of the pandemic, but because of some developments in technology. The pandemic has allowed regulation on healthcare to relax. During the pandemic, up to June 19th, so another 3 weeks or so, and since I think March 20 or somewhere in the mid-March timeframe, the federal government has relaxed the HIPAA regulations on healthcare providers. So doctors were allowed and are allowed now until June to use things like their iPhone, Facebook, Messenger, and things like these types of tools that are just publicly available to connect with their patients. Before COVID and after that date, that's not going to be allowed because of privacy concerns and because of regulation and so on. Not only that, but also insurers and insurance companies have been required, some by their own will, and some by the government, to compensate medical professionals for these types of telehealth services. So that was something that in the past, if you're a doctor and you have a patient who is, you're a doctor, let's say in Maryland, you have a patient in Maryland, you can treat that patient or examine the patient over a regulated web type of service, but you get compensated $5. The government would say, we would put a limit that you get compensated $5 for spending 15 minutes with your patient. Obviously, that's a very low return on investment for the health care provider, the doctor, and his or her employer. They would go bankrupt if that's all they did. But with COVID, the government said, hey, we'll pay you $15. So there's more of an incentive. It's still very low compared to, spending 15 minutes with the patient in the clinic and getting paid $150, but it's a better incentive. So things have changed. And after COVID, some things will return to what they were before and some will not. They will continue to evolve into a new state that we might not even know about today. It's still evolving. But what we see here on this chart, skilled trades is in need. Well-trained electricians and plumbers and mechanics and construction workers, as you can see on number 7. Sales and marketing, engineering, innovation, cybersecurity, logistics. Logistics is going to be big, and new models of financial funding of organizations, finance, analytics and things of that nature. What we're seeing at the bottom right of the chart here, it's telling us that these are percentages of companies in different size segments that have shortage in talent. So for example, it's saying, medium-sized companies that have 50 to 250 employees, 75% of them in the US, that gray bar there, have shortage in talent. Worldwide, the number is 62%. So across the globe, average 62% of the companies, have some sort of shortage in talent. So regardless what the number is, I mean, obviously these are averages. The good news for most people is that it's a high percentage. It's over 50%, which says that there's a lot of opportunity for people to work. The question becomes, how do these people find the work and how do they become a good fit? Because the companies are saying we need talent, but we can't find them. But there are people out there definitely looking for work, and the companies are not necessarily interested in hiring all those applicants because they don't see that they're a good fit. So that's where we need to understand the dynamics and how things are changing a little bit. So the chart here on the left comes from a French data scientist. His name is Nicolas, and he has an interesting website with different types of illustrations. But this one, kind of a summary of the evolution of the employee or the worker. We're moving from the traditional 9 to 5, where you go to work, you use your company's resources, and You're told what to do, and you progress by seniority or by performance, somehow. Today, this is not really the future. This is today. People work anytime. I mean, people get up and work from home. It could be 5 in the morning after Fajr. It could be 10 o'clock at night after they put their kids to bed. People can work from anywhere, especially after this pandemic. A lot of organizations had to institute telework, and they've put some infrastructure in place. They've put software and hardware systems and security systems so their employees can connect. It is an investment. The federal government might compensate for some of it, not necessarily all, but the fact is that these organizations have put some resources, have put some investments into these types of capabilities and assets, and they would want to get some return on investment. So if they can now save on their office rent and keep people working from home, they would do that. IBM was a company that was ahead of the game back in the late 80s, early 90s, when the company was bellying up and was about to disappear. And Louis Grishner came on board, and he was a CEO from Nabisco, from a food industry, but he understood services. He understood how to turn a company around. There's a really good book out there called Who Said Elephants Can't Dance that talks about Louis Grishner and how he kind of transformed IBM from a commodity company that sells hardware and software products to a services company. And he started the global business services arm of IBM, the consulting arm. IBM at one point had 400,000 employees, 500,000 employees. That's a large number. There are many countries who have less population than that number. They operated in over 100 countries across the globe. And you can imagine, to have office space for 400,000 people is very expensive. So they were ahead of the game, and they started having their people work remotely. I personally worked for them for a while, and for 6 years, I've never been to a building because, we just didn't have facilities in the local area. So work anywhere is something that is gonna become very common in many industries, not just technology, but in a variety of industries, in healthcare, in logistics, in technology, education. We're gonna start to see even distance learning opportunities for K to 12 and higher education, especially that the pandemic, even though we're reopening, everyone is going to be forced to have less density in classrooms, less density at the workplace. So if you're an employer and you have 10 desks or 10 workstations in a particular area for 10 employees, today you're going to make that 5. You're going to have one employee work here and the next desk is vacant and another employee. So you're going to either stagger people, they come on different days. Some people work from home half the week, the other group works from home the other half, or you're going to have to just spread your employees across a little bit more, because predictions are the virus is going to be around for another year at least, if not more, until we find some sort of treatment or vaccination or some sort of mitigation. So people will be working from anywhere. And because of advancements in technology, people might end up using any device. If the employers can put good safeguard security mechanisms on phones and laptops and things like that, people can use any device. So literally, you can go to the beach and work from there. You can go to your sister's home and work from there. You can go take care of your parents, and work from wherever you need to be. The other more important shift here, and this is really important, is that focus on outputs. Today, employers no longer tell their employees, this is what you need to do, but rather they say, this is what you need to accomplish, and you go figure out how to do it. So employers are shifting now to a more agile workplace where the employee has to figure out how to do certain things. The expectation the employer is skilled enough and talented enough, has enough competency and knowledge to figure out how to make things happen. The employee is told what the output needs to look like. It's sort of like a little bit of the consultant or contractor mindset. You go hire a contractor to, renovate your roof, all you tell your contractor is, I need a new roof that doesn't leak, but you're not going to tell the contractor how to do their job. So they're going to say, okay, we got it. We need to get shingles, and we need to, take some bad wood out and get plywood, and so forth. Same concept now is becoming more prevalent, more common across different industries. The expectation is the employee knows what they're doing, and they just need to go and get it done and figure out. And as a result, people are expected to create their own career ladders. So again, the mindset that you come in as employee 1 and then you're promoted to 2 and then 3, that's kind of the old model, and that's phasing out. Today, people are expected to create their own paths within their organizations and sometimes outside of their organizations. But again, managers and forward thinking and looking leaders are expecting their team members to come to them and say, you know what, I've accomplished this over the past year, and I think the next logical step for me is to start this thing in our company or to do this. And with that comes a continuum of types of work arrangements, from a traditional employee organization, a company that has 50, 100, 1,000 employees, whatever it is, to a joint venture, to the crowd model that I mentioned a little earlier. A crowd model where people work together, they don't even know each other. It's like youth who get on a platform to play video games together, and they've never seen each other. They don't know each other. They're from different continents, but they're playing the same game with the same goal, which is to succeed. And some of these youth would create their own teams. So you have, a 15-year-old in the US with a team of people from Denmark, from France, from Egypt, from whatever. And that's one team, and they're playing against another team. That's a crowd model. Crowd productivity has started 8-10 years ago, and it's becoming more prevalent. Examples is a company called Top Coder. Top Coder is a bunch of developers, software developers, that basically are available to work on any piece of software project, and the projects get kind of advertised and people bid on it. And then they can create their own teams and work with people that they've never seen before to accomplish something that some customer will purchase. And then in the middle, you have the contractor model, where you kind of work for yourself, and you might serve 4 or 5 different organizations or people or thousands of clients, depending on what type of service you're offering. So that's kind of the continuum, and we expect to see more of this, and more of a shift towards the right, where people want to work on their own. Sort of like we're coming back to the early days of work and employment, where people used to work for themselves, right? Back in the days of the Prophet ﷺ, there was no such thing as companies. There were people who work. They had jobs. They would purchase goods and sell them. And as the Prophet ﷺ says, 9/10, 90% of provisions is in commerce. So we're kind of moving back to that model where the employee is not just a worker, but also a leader, a business leader, someone who's buying and selling something. That something could be their talent, their services, their offerings, their goods, whatever that thing is. It could be an accounting expertise. It could be a software development knowledge. It could be knowledge of how to manage a project. It could be actual physical products like, hats and gloves and shoes, or it could be a service like fixing something or so forth. So the model is changing, and we want to be adaptive to that model. That means we need to learn new skills that we didn't learn in school or college, or never even thought we would deal with it, like being a business person, because you're selling your product, you're selling your talent, or marketing, because again, you're competing now. If you're in a crowd model with hundreds of thousands of people across the globe, not just the local area, you need to know how to market yourself, how to brand yourself. How are you different from another developer somewhere else? And how can you adjust, and be competitive? So these are some of the changes that we're seeing around us. We see them manifested in models like the Uber model, right? So gone are the days of the taxi, the cab companies, where people had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a license to operate in a big city. If you and I wanted to go get a cab, license to work in Baltimore City or Washington, D.C., it'd be virtually impossible, very expensive. And there's a limit. Only 5, 6, 10 companies have that license, and they're approved, and that's it. The market is closed. But today with a platform like Uber, that's the crowd model, the platform is there. Hundreds and thousands of people can become taxi drivers if they want, and they can purchase multiple vehicles and have other people work for them if they want. They can come up with their own business model and so forth. So this is one example. Amazon is another example, and there are many other models out there that are evolving. All right, so I'll pause here for a quick second, see if anyone had any questions before we continue, inshallah. So feel free again to put it in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself if you have any questions, inshallah. All right, so post-COVID-19 changes. Definitely COVID-19 has impacted the economy, the global economy, big. It's probably the biggest hit since the Great Depression, a lot more than the 2008 market crash. We've seen the numbers in the media of unemployment, and that has a ripple effect on many things. If people are not employed, they don't have money to spend. That means other industries will suffer. That means, jobs will be laid off, and it's just a ripple effect, and it takes a lot of time to recoup all of that. This country has been a little fortunate that the government has just been printing money and sending it out to people. Even small amounts do help. So $2,400 or $1,200 per person or whatever. It's a small amount, but it might pay someone's rent for a month, or just whatever it would produce. But the point is, the government stepped in and printed money. Of course, there's a drawback to that, but it took some action to help people not get to that stage of the Great Depression. But for us, what's important is that this whole COVID-19 impact or change is going to impact the way people work and the way people connect with each other and socialize. So that's where we're going to see the biggest changes. It's going to be like a spark that introduces changes to industries in general. Some industries will be reformed, like the example I gave about healthcare and telehealth and compensation. When you look at the healthcare industry, especially in this country, it's very saddening. You have a lot of great innovation that is coming out almost every day, if not, every week or every month, but definitely, on a periodic frequency. New innovation, new devices that can detect diseases and illnesses. But sometimes there's no incentive for the doctor or the doctor's organization to use this device, simply because the government says, we won't compensate you for using this device. It's as simple as that. So there could be a camera that can be used by a medical professional, for example, to examine a patient's eye to figure out if they have a certain type of illness or not. That is way cheaper and more convenient for the patient and the doctor than dilating the patient's eye, waiting for half an hour, checking the eye, doing certain things to figure out if they got this illness or not. And it might not be as accurate even. But there is a regulation that says if you use approach A, you'll get compensated X dollars. If you use approach B, you'll get compensated 20X. So of course, the businesses and the doctor will be forced to use approach B. So that is causing a lot of challenges in the healthcare industry and frustrations on side of the providers, the doctors who really want to treat their patients and do the best for them, but they're kind of handicapped. They can't, because either their employer has no incentive, or the government or the insurance company is not reimbursing at the right rate. So some of these industries, this example for healthcare, might go through some reform. You might have some public official in Congress who says, wait a minute, we've seen how telehealth worked. We've seen how this new technology worked when there was no regulation. So let's reform. Let's change our laws. You might see other industries restructure. For example, Amazon is not just a retail company like we said, it's an innovation company. As a matter of fact, Amazon is introducing itself into healthcare as a provider. What is Amazon doing when it comes to healthcare? It's eliminating the insurance company. All this whole sector can disappear because now Amazon will connect the doctor to the patient directly. And the doctor can say, you know what, instead of charging $200 for 30 minutes, I'm going to charge 60 because the 120 of it was going to the insurance company. So I'm going to lower my rates and work directly with my patient. And the patient now maybe doesn't need to pay $1,200 or $2,000 a month to get healthcare. They can just pay $200. So things will be restructured. We'll see industries, complete industries that will disappear, completely disappear. And we'll see industries that reform themselves. And we need to understand, how does that affect us? If I work in one industry, we all work in different industries, how my industry is going to be impacted by change and so forth. The next 3 points are kind of common across the globe, across the industries. So the fact people need to be agile, businesses need to be responsive quickly. They need to make quick decisions, cheap decisions with incremental improvements and changes. No one has the ability anymore to put a 10-year improvement plan. That's just not going to happen. But people and businesses will make quick incremental changes and will make it quickly. So agility is so important. Agility in decision making and adapting new approaches, new processes, new ways of doing things, learning new things, whether at an organizational level or a worker level. So that's a common trait that we all have to get used to. And that kind of takes us to the next step, which is digital transformation, meaning electronics, technology will replace human beings in decision making, in data analytics, in making certain types of conclusions, in automating certain types of tasks. So today, for a number of years, it's been out there, at least 5 to 10 years, robotic RPA, what is it called? RPA, robotic programming, I believe, automation, where basically your software can fill out forms for you or capture data from forms rather than a human being entering data. It scans it, it populates it into a database, and it's done. So we're seeing a lot of this transformation. Access to services, rather than people getting in a car and driving to some physical place to get a service or a product, they can do it today from their home. You can sit at home and order your groceries. You can order your merchandise, perishable or non-perishable, it doesn't matter. You can even order services like medical services, education services. So really, you've here eliminated the need for a car. I mean, how many of us have been driving their cars in the past 60 days? Not many. To the point that insurance companies are starting now to send checks to people saying, hey, you don't drive your car so much, so we're sending you $200 out of your 6-month premium because we realize the risk of driving now is so low. There are less cars on the road, you don't drive as much as you used to. They're not doing it out of their great heart. They're doing it because they realize if they don't do that, they will lose customers. How would they lose customers? People are not driving their cars. They just take their tags off and go put it at the MVA and park their garage on their driveway for, a few months until they decide if they want to keep the car or sell it. So you're going to see industries again transform. That means less demand on cars. That means less demand on drivers, on roads, but there will be higher demand on other things, on security services, on IT, on logistics, because these things need to be delivered, and so on. And then we talked about the pervasiveness of work, meaning people will be working from anywhere. You'll be working from the road, from your home, from your child's practice, wherever it is, you'll be able to work. All you need is a smart device and an internet connection. All right, so a little thing here before we move on to the next point, the concept of work in Islam. Islam puts so much emphasis on work. Over 350 or 60 verses in the Quran mention the word amal. And there's another 100 or so that mentions mentions the word fi'l, yaf'al, to do. And over 80 times Allah accompanies the word belief with work, with amal. وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Give glad tidings to those who believe and do good deeds. What? That they have great rewards. لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٌ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ, and so forth. So over 80 times, a person who's a believer and who works, who does good deeds, accompanies that belief with good deeds, has a positive outcome. They have the Jannah, they have the Firdaus, they have no sadness, and so forth. So work in Islam is so important, and Islam values wealth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran mentions that wealth has to be circulated in a society. And we have an entire wealth distribution system called zakah, because wealth is so important for the livelihood of a society and a community. And we have the categories of zakah and the criteria to pay zakah and when to pay it, and it's a fully developed complete system of wealth distribution. And when implemented, as we've seen in the past, there's no need for it. There will be times when they couldn't find people to take zakat, because if it's implemented properly, it's sufficient to take care of the needs of society. So it's really important, as Muslims, we recognize and we view work and careers and jobs not as something that is low priority so I can just get an income and go by my life or take care of my kids. No, it's an honorable, prestigious activity or category in our life that we really need to pay attention to as a means for us to be able to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to worship Him properly and to be empowered on the planet first, and then to take care of our needs second. So it has a big significance in our lives, to the point that when we're working, whatever our profession is, we have to see it as a continuum to our act of worship. If I'm an accountant, or I am an engineer or a doctor or an IT professional, whatever it is, I should not differentiate with a solid line between that piece of work and my spiritual work. They got to be intertwined, and it's got to be a continuation to the spiritual work that we all strive to do, because Islam is a complete package, it's a complete way of life, and separating the two doesn't make it that complete way of life. So it's a mindset, and if we look at that in that mindset, our careers will become exciting, and we will be trying the best to actually have a career that we craft ourselves rather than look for a job, right? And unfortunately, many people, not just in the Muslim community, but across in general, people look for a job rather than the job, right? Rather than the career. And they look at it in a very isolated way. How does it help me and my family, rather than how does it help my community and my society? A different perspective, but it's important because that gives it not only strength, but also a good, exciting, motivational angle to it. All right, so this kind of covers the first point here. Before we jump into number 2, I'm gonna pause again for a little bit and see if anyone had any questions as I was talking, if you took any notes down or anything you wanted to share, inshallah, with the group. So feel free to unmute yourself or put something in the chat, inshallah. No questions? All right, so a couple of points here to talk about assessing one's viability. How viable are we in the employment market, right? Are we still of value? Are we still of interest? This grid is kind of commonly used by different people. It shows 2 dimensions: potential of a person versus the performance of the person. It's a grid of 9. You can have someone who is high performing, but have very little potential. So they're down here. A strong performer, but unlikely to move into a higher level role. They're missing out on some skills. They don't have leadership skills. They're narrow focused, narrow minded. They're focused on one particular area, or they just not seeing the bigger context of the organization or the team that they're on, or whatever the case might be. On the flip side, you can have someone who's a very low performer, but a high potential. So up here. So they don't meet expectations, but for one reason or another, that's happening. But if that reason changes, they can actually move over to this area where they exceed expectations or they meet expectations, and they're not only having a high potential, but they're also having a high or an average, performance. So the question is, where do we fit in this grid? And all of us fit in different boxes at different times. I mean, we could be in the middle here, which is where most people are most of the time. We meet expectations. We have, good potential. That's where most people are most of the time. But some of that group of people move up to, we exceed expectations, right? So there will be these days or weeks or months where we've done something extraordinary on our job and we exceeded that expectation, but then 3-4 weeks later, we came back to meet expectations, right? Or we can fall sometimes short. We don't meet expectations. We all have those rough days where something just didn't work out, right? Someone in the bigger team did not click with us, or we missed some expectation, and now we have a big problem on hand. And, people see us as poor performers, or we might be good performers, but we're perceived as poor performers, or we might actually be poor performers. Regardless of what it is, the question is, are we cognizant of where we sit? And that's important. Self-awareness. As the Prophet ﷺ said, a Muslim or mu'min kayyusun fatin, believer is smart, vigilant. It's important to know, am I here today? Was I here last week or last month? How about last year when I joined the company? Maybe when I joined, I was at the top box here. I exceeded expectations. I had a great potential, but somehow over the year or two, I dropped into this area where I do not meet expectations, but I have a medium potential. Am I aware of that? Why did that happen? So these are some questions we can ask ourselves. Where are we this week? And why are we where we are? Why did we exceed expectations? What did I do that took me there? How does my personal strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats around me affect where I am? Sometimes our position on this map changes because of a threat that happened around me or an opportunity that presented itself that I really didn't have much to do with. And sometimes it's because of a weakness that I have, but now that weakness came up to the surface because the circumstances around me have changed. So for example, hypothetical example, I might be a very top high performer, but now with COVID, I need to work from home. So I need to use technology more. I need to be self-disciplined in working. I need to have clear boundaries on work and home and so forth. And because of that, I might have a weakness in these areas, and I fall from someone who's meeting or exceeding expectations to someone who does not meet expectations. So these are things that if we're becoming more aware about, it could help us develop ourselves earlier than later, and also help us seek some guidance from those who we work with. So another question to ask ourselves, what type of style is my manager? We're seeing more and more leaders and managers who become of the coaching style. They're willing to teach their team. Again, they have the mindset, hey, go accomplish A, so focus on the outcome. And if you have a question along the road, come and ask me. But I'm not going to sit down and tell you how to do your job. Even if it's a new thing, a new technology, a new piece of knowledge, you should be able to go out and figure it out. You go to the internet, you buy a book, you take a class, you figure out how to achieve that, or you come ask questions. So do I have that type of environment? And if that's the case, am I leveraging it? Am I fitting properly into it so I can become coachable and grow and align with the rest of the people or the environment around me. So that's a reference point here. You can ask about, where you fit. You can ask your manager, you can ask yourself, you can do your own observations and try to see where you fit. Another thing to think about here is how employable are we? So employers look for people who can bring value to the bottom line. They can make an impact. So depending on the industry, if you are, in the healthcare industry, how many patients can you treat? And how many can you treat properly and well? If you are in the IT industry, how many software capabilities can you introduce, and what is this going to do to our customers? How many customer problems can you solve using software? If you're in the accounting industry, how many dollars can you save our clients? How many good business deals can you make for our clients with their partners? If you're an attorney, how many problems can you mitigate for your clients, and so forth. So it's really about the bottom line. It's about what can you bring to the table, this business outcome at the bottom here. And in that process of achieving these business outcomes, what competencies do you know? So if you're an accountant, are you up to speed and up to date on data analytics in the field of accounting? Are you aware how to use dashboards and tools to show data and come up with this business decisions? Because gone are the days of punching numbers. We can bring machines to do that today, but machines are still not very good at making business decisions. They can give us forecasts, they can give us graphs and tell us this is where we think things are going, but there's not a lot of good software out there that can actually tell us steps 1 through 7. These are the things you as a CEO need to do over the next 9 months. You need to feed a lot of data, and you need a lot of historical trends to kind of come up with that level of complexity. It's not there today. Maybe in 5-10 years it'll be there when computers become more powerful and historical data is available. So that's where we as humans bring in an extra value. Are we also experienced and savvy about processes, just general concepts? When you're working on something, it needs to be done, checked, and approved. That's a general concept. So if it's done, okay, I'll do it, or some team of people will do it. Checked, again, a committee or a group or a task force or a review body needs to review it. And then it also needs to be approved. Approval could mean people are bought into it, they are engaged in that decision, you have their support, or they actually officially sign off on it. So are you familiar with such a process? Are you familiar with an intake process? Whatever that intake is, it could be intake of a homeless person into a shelter, it could be intake of a customer into a store, it could be intake of a student into a school to enroll. But are you familiar with these generally known processes today in today's world? So we're seeing that there are certain competencies that are becoming de facto standard. Just like for many people today, it's assumed you know how to use a word processor, you know how to use Microsoft Word and how to use an Excel spreadsheet. These are assumptions. It would be very difficult to find someone who doesn't know that skill and be employable in at least an information-based job, right? But today it's not just about Word documents and Excel spreadsheets, it's about web pages, it's about video. These are common skills that we expect any 28-year-old to know. We expect a 28-year-old to know how to do a video and how to build a web page in less than 10 minutes. And we expect the same thing from a 50-year-old person. Maybe they won't do it as aesthetically pleasing as a 28-year-old, but they need to understand how to do it. They need to understand the competency, the functional competency. So maybe they're not doing it, but they can give direction to the 28-year-old to do it, and they understand what it really takes. So these are some of the examples of how things are changing. And then business competencies, we talked about marketing, we talked about especially digital marketing, we talked about branding, we talked about partnerships and crowd type of business models and so forth. So how much are we of a fit to the economy today, right? Forget about an employer, forget about a particular company or a job, but the global economy. Each one of us is competing with 7 billion other people. Now you can slice it a bit more and say, well, I'm an accountant, so I compete only with accountants of the world. Sure, 500,000, 500 million people across the globe, whatever that number is, but you're competing with someone across the globe, whoever that is, all ages, all genders, all countries. How do we fit into this global economy? So this is kind of how especially young people want to be thinking today, those are in high school and college, because when they graduate, again, the world would have changed and evolved quite a bit. So that was the second piece, knowing where we fit, assessing our viability. I want to spend a little bit of time on two important concepts, and then we'll do an activity, inshallah, right after that. The first thing, when it comes to career planning, so remember we're talking here about career planning, is the vision. It all starts with where do you see yourself in the future? Regardless how old or young you are, if you just finished high school, a young brother texted me last night. He said, hey, how's it going? I'm looking for a job. And he said this whole Corona thing messed up my money. This is a 19 or 20-year-old, texting. And I was like, okay, I'm thinking in my head, don't you do other things? So he's like, yeah, I do some stuff, but I'm looking for a steady income. So the question is, how does he see himself in the future? How do each one of us see ourselves in the future? What role do we see ourselves playing in 6 months, 2 years, a year, 10 years, or when we retire? What roles would we have played? Are we in a role of a facilitator? So we're some sort of leader facilitating for other people to get their jobs done? Or do we see ourselves as the role of a builder? We're actually building things. We're developing the software ourselves. We're treating the patient ourselves. We're doing the data analytics for the financial statement ourselves. So what's our role? What type of role do you see yourself? And then what's your position? You could be a facilitator at a chief level, like a CEO or a CFO, or you could be a facilitator at a team level. You're a team lead. So what position do you see yourself? What are the contributions you would have liked to bring to the world? What are the natures of those contributions? Would you like to be seen as a problem solver? That goes back to the role, or more of a risk mitigator, or what kind of contribution, are you thinking about? So if you're a teacher, what's your vision? That in 5 years, I've taught 10,000 youth or students, or, kindergarten kids, or I've taught, 3,000 children to read and know the alphabet, right? That's my contribution. So my role here is I'm a teacher, I'm an educator. My position might be I'm a kindergarten teacher. And the last point is, what's the impact of that? So now that you taught 5,000 5-year-olds how to read, that's your contribution. What is the impact on society? Oh, the impact is that by the age of 7, they're going to have a passion for reading, and they will spend a good portion of their day reading, which makes them good innovators and good critical thinkers and rather than them spending time on video games, for example, or doing something else. So that's kind of the vision. Having that vision in your mind is going to, one, help you find the right career for yourself. Number 2, find the right job in that career, that step to the next step. And number 3, keep you very focused on the impact. So you're not going to the school to teach those 5-year-olds just to read and write because that's your job. But no, it's because you're trying to make an impact. You're trying to instill in them the value of reading. So it's not about the ability to read that this is a car and this is a cat and the difference is an R and a T, but rather it's about building a generation of 3,000 students over 5 years or whatever number of years, so that you have a generation who appreciates knowledge and reading 2, 4, 5, 6 years later. So it's a different mindset. And when we go to our daily jobs with that mindset, we're more passionate about it. We're more caring. We see more of a purpose. It's not just a paycheck. It's something that makes me want to get up in the morning and be excited about doing it. So you really want to take, just like this gentleman here taking a picture, you want to take a snapshot of the future and ask those 4 questions. What would I look like fast forward some period of time? It doesn't matter what that is. It could be 6 months. You can come up with a short-term vision, and that's actually recommended if you want to do a quick turnaround or transformation to your career. If you feel you're stuck somewhere, you can have a short-term 3-month, 6-month vision. In 90 days or 120 days, this is inshallah what I'm trying to accomplish. And you can go back, inshallah, and look how close you've achieved that vision. And by the way, doing a turnaround doesn't necessarily mean you have to leave your employer. Sometimes opportunities are right under our feet. We just don't see them. Sometimes we don't have confidence in ourselves. Sometimes we don't communicate to others in the organization that we want to do something differently. Sometimes we're not even aware of our strengths and weaknesses. That's why those previous 2 slides come in handy. Where do I fit? What am I strong in? What am I weak in? All of us have strengths and all of us have weaknesses. And we shouldn't wait for our manager to come to us and say, all right, you're strong here, you're weak here. We got to be able to ask those questions and kind of understand, be emotionally intelligent to understand where things are at, or just ask direct questions. So it starts with a vision that leads or is fueled by the mission. So do we see our jobs as an intriguing, beautiful picture like this mountain, landscape? The beautiful forest, the lake, the mountains, the skies excites us, right? Are we like these 2 young boys on the side there looking down at the valley when we look at our jobs? Is it intriguing to us, right? Do we have faith in our, is it driven by our faith? Do we have conviction Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can provide for us if we take the means? Are we passionate about our jobs? Or again, has it turned into a paycheck? Has it turned into a daily routine where we forgot why we're working in this company to start with, right? We're working in this company because we believe in the mission. We believe in what we're doing here. So we're interested in it, we're motivated, and we are driving ourselves. We are taking initiative. We're not waiting for a task to happen every week, the routine task that needs to be redone, or someone giving us a list of things to do, but rather we're driving the work. And that's, again, the focus on the outcomes. And this is what employers are expecting. And when we don't kind of do that, that's where frustration starts to evolve, both on the employee and the employer. So what excites us every morning when we get up and go to our work? That's an important question. And if we don't feel that excitement, then these 4 or 5 things that we're looking at need to be reevaluated. Why am I not passionate? All right, do I have a vision for myself? It's like, if we don't have a vision, it's like you wander in the street in your neighborhood. But if you leave your house with a clear picture that you're going to the grocery store to buy some, necessities, you will accomplish your goal and be very satisfied. Or you could leave your home with a very clear picture that you're going for a walk to enjoy the fresh air. So you're also going to be satisfied. But if you just leave your home aimlessly, wandering around, you probably come back home confused. You're stressed out because you didn't know where you were going. You just came back. You didn't accomplish anything specific. You didn't meet a certain expectation that you've put for yourself. And that's where the vision comes in. It puts an expectation that in some point in the future, this is what I'm trying to achieve. And that motivates me to achieve that. That's the mission right there. And research has found that when we challenge ourselves a little bit, that gives us motivation. So we always want to look for a little challenging effort that's not becoming a burden. It's not too challenging to the point it's a burden, but it's also not too easy that becomes naive and we kind of don't feel excited about it. That's where the routine kicks in. You don't want to be working in a routine. You want to take that routine and change it into something intriguing that makes you drive the organization, drive your goals, drive your professional development. All right, so last segment of the day, we'll talk real quick about some practical things to do if you are looking to grow your career or change jobs or change just where you are in your career. You might stay in the same company, do the same job, but you're growing in it. You're doing it better. You're growing in it, taking it to the next step. You're paving for yourself that self promotion within the organization. So this comes from a book I wrote a few years ago in 2011. It's called Pragmatic Job Hunting. It's available on Amazon if you're interested in getting it. And it talks about some key items here. The concept I want you to think about is if you're looking for a job, or you know someone who's looking for a job, rather than treat it as a task, like, all right, I'm going to get in online today, go to Indeed.com or LinkedIn, look for some jobs. And if I find, 10, I'll apply to 10 of them and see what hits. Look at it as a project. What does that mean? Projects have start and dates. They have a clear scope. They have a clear schedule, a budget. There's certain expectations to meet. So there's quality. The definition of quality is meeting your customers' expectations. Projects have teams. They need to communicate with each other, and there's some risk involved. If you look at your job hunting or your next step in your career as a project, you will achieve a lot more progress and it will make a lot of sense to you. And you're not going to spend your entire day doing it and get exhausted and stressed out. You would use a very small portion of your day, allowing you to use the rest of your day for other things that are also motivating for you in your life, like spending time with your family or relaxing or doing a hobby or whatever it is that makes you feel good. So when it comes to scope definition, that's driven by your vision and mission. You got to start with your vision, right? We'll give you a couple of hypothetical examples. The book goes through details, but just very simple. Let's say someone graduated today from high school. 19-year-old, he decides he doesn't want to go to college. His vision is to make $5,000 a month within 6 months. So for 6 months, he's going to continue living with his parents. In 6 months, he's going to start to make $5,000 through some trade, some vocational type of work. Carpenter, plumber, electrician, whatever. That's his vision. So he spends some time, looks around, tests a few things, goes to an apprentice here, there. He finds out that he likes plumbing. So his vision is he took a month to do that. In 5 months, he's going to be someone with a master plumber certificate or license. He can go to people's homes, fix faucets, change pipes, maybe even work with a construction crew part-time. And that's what he's going to be doing for a period of time. But after his second month of work, he's going to be making $5,000 a month. That's his vision. And the mission is because he likes to do things with his hands. He likes to save water, conserve water, whatever. He has a passion for plumbing. He likes to put fittings and welding and all this great stuff, right? So he's going to come up with a scope statement. Basically, the statement says something like this: secure a skilled trade in the area of plumbing within 5 months as a master plumber in the state of Maryland, because that's where he lives, And that's where he's going to get certified. So he becomes a certified master plumber. And maybe even he's very specific what type of plumbing he wants to do. So he would say working in the area of natural gas. So he only does piping for natural gas projects. He's very specific. So even though he has the skill to work on water pipes and other types of piping, he is specifically scoping his work to be natural gas, which means when it comes to job hunt, it's much more focused effort. He's going to look at the gas companies. He's going to look at some maybe manufacturers who use gas in their facilities, possibly power plants, and that's it. He's not going to go look at a dairy farm that has pipes for milk. He's not going to go look at residential piping or water heaters or boilers. He's not going to go look at irrigation systems. So he's focused in his scope. He's going to set a time, the 5 months, and he's going to set a budget. He's going to say, I'm looking to an investment of $5,000 a month. I'm going to put $5,000 down to invest in this, and I will recoup it after my first month, just like a project, just like a business. So he took aside $5,000. He might not have that money. He goes to his parents. Can you give me $3,000? He gets another grand from a friend, a fifth grand from somewhere else. He saved money. He puts $5,000 and he says, this is the budget for my job hunt project. I'm going to use some of it to train myself, to get certified, to go to a conference in some other distant state and stay at a hotel and get an air ticket and whatnot. And I'm going to use some of it to buy some material and supplies to practice and do my own thing. And I'll have a little bit left for my resume, printing, you know, maybe even setting up a website. Why does he need a website? Because remember, we talked about what? We talked about crowd employment. Even though he might end up working with BGE, we live in an economy where we are self-employing ourselves. We are selling ourselves. So you have to be ready to kind of be independent, right? So now he's got a budget and he's setting certain quality expectations. What does that mean? What it means is that I will apply to 90% of the opportunities in the market every day. So the market has a capacity. Now he's scoped his work or his focus to natural gas. So he knows in the local area that he's interested in, the state of Maryland, there's 10 employers who deal with natural gas. A gas company or two, a couple of big manufacturers, you know, some other power plants, whatnot. That's his market. If each one of those 10 employers has 2 openings every day, that's a maximum of 20 jobs a day. Maximum. All he needs to do is look for 18 of those. Those are hypothetical numbers. But it might be that the capacity of the market for those 10 employers is not 2 jobs every day, but 2 jobs every month in the area that he's looking for. So his capacity now, his opportunity, is only 18 a month. And that's all he's going to look for. He's not going to apply to hundreds and hundreds of positions. He's only going to apply to 18. And within the 5-month period, he will land a job with one of those 18 times 5 because there is a market and there is a demand. And remember from the previous slides, most companies don't have enough talent. They don't have the proper fit. So now he's going to be ready because he had a budget, he had a time schedule, he had certain expectations. He's investing in that period of time, those 5 months, so that he can be that good fit, so that he can get one of those 18 times 5 opportunities during that time period. In order to do that properly, he has to have a team. He's going to need some mentors to train him. He's going to go to some places to take classes. He's going to start to make connections with people, go to conferences, create a network of people, of professional people, a few people in his community who are resourceful, have connections, know things, you know, whatnot. And he's going to start to create a way where he communicate with the world around him. And just like any project, there will be some risk involved because he doesn't know. He hasn't done this before. but he has conviction that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help him, just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Musa's mother to throw him into the box, into the river. It didn't make a lot of sense, right? So a lot of people, when I tell them or share this with them, and you'll see it in the book, they say, are you kidding me? I can barely make ends meet. I have no money. You want me to go out and spend a month's worth of my salary to train myself and to look for a job? I just need a job to pay my bills. But yes, that's where the conviction has to come in. If you trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a Razzaq, and if you trust that taking the means is important in our deen, then inshallah you will see the results. So it's a science. There's no, magic or art to it. We have to depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have to also take the means. So I want here the group, inshallah, to get together now. There's about 3 of us here. So inshallah, we can brainstorm. On the next slide, I'll tell you exactly what we want to do, but we can sum this whole thing up in what? The purpose that we have been created, which is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and working is part of that worship. If we work, from that perspective, that it's a duty on us as believers to work so that we can, uplift our deen and our communities. All right, so together, brainstorm some ideas how you can develop these things for yourself, or, someone that who might be looking for a change. And remember, from last session, we talked about the whys, the 6 whys. You ask yourself why. And then towards the end, you want to get to what would the scope look like? What would the schedule look like? What would the budget be? What would the quality expectations look like? Who is my team? And then how would I make this happen? So inshallah, I'll give you 10 minutes or so to brainstorm together. And then you can, on your own, again, later tonight, tomorrow, do this exercise for yourself. And if you feel you want to reach out, we can review it together. I'd be more than happy to take a look at it, inshallah. So I'll pause here, inshallah, and let the group come up with some ideas and brainstorm together.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Alhamdulillah. So each one needs to brainstorm an idea, or we need to do it together?
Yeah, we can do it together. If you want, we can break into 2 rooms. Sister Fathiya, and then me and Brother Muhammad can be in another room. So we can do that as well, and then regroup in 5 minutes if you like. Or we can just have one big discussion here, whatever you all prefer.
I prefer one big discussion. So
Yeah, that's
what do you
think? That's better. One big discussion is good.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So let's start with the vision and mission. Anyone has any thoughts? How can you come up with a vision statement and a mission purpose statement for your career?
So and for me, I love a lot of stuff. Like, for example, I love the mathematics. I love applying mathematics, and I like, to start something and finish it in the way I see it, but I don't see how all these fit in my life. I have a gap between what I like and what actually my life look like.
Okay. So it's a great point you raised. So when you say I like math or I like this, that's kind of more aligned to your mission, right? The issue here is, how do I take that mission and turn it into a picture of the future, right? How do I align the 2? And part of it is, of course, understanding what's out there and your strengths, and some of the things we talked about earlier today.
Mhm.
But I think you're on the right track. You're starting with what's your mission, right? So just differentiate between what you like as a preference and what you would dedicate your life to. That's what mission really is. So for example, someone could like math because it's intriguing and they like to solve problems, but it's more like a hobby. But then there could be another person who dedicates her life to mathematics. Like their whole life will be spent to improve how people use mathematics, for example, right? And that's where the mission is. If you're at that point, then you want to set a vision. All right, if that's who I am, what would that passion look like in 6 months? And then you can start taking steps to get there. And it would bridge that gap a little bit.
But at the same time, I have other stuff that I like too. So sometimes it looks like I like like 2 or 3 things, but if I start one, each one has a different direction. So it will be like I'm just scattering myself all over the place, or I'm not sure how to look at them in that sense.
That's correct. That's where your scope helps you narrow down that passion, right? So that's where you would have to come up with a scope statement, and because no one can do everything we like, we're just not going to be able. We have limited capacity. So that's why you dream big with your mission. You have an idea what you're passionate about. You come up with a picture of the future, right? This is where I can be, and then you scope it down. So the example I provided about the young person who can become a plumber, even within that one industry, that one domain, that one technical expertise, the right thing to do is specify which type of plumbing, right?
Mhm.
It makes it easier and better. That same person can be a general plumber and do many things, but what's going to end up happening, just like you said, that person would have to have 6 resumes: a resume for gas, a resume for water, a resume for manufacturing, and then it becomes very difficult to maintain 6 resumes and prepare for 6 different types of interviews and understand 6 different types of applications of plumbing, right? So I think the first step is you want to sit down, do an exercise. What is it that I want to dedicate my life to? And if that thing is whatever it is, what's the picture I have in my mind a year from today? And how do I scope it down? And then you have to stay focused and come up with a project to get to that step. Anyone else has any other advice for Sister Emma or thoughts?
I think you have this is just an opinion, which as I relate to her in some ways, that not focusing really takes a long time, which I understand from your discussion is that not being specific and spreading your ideas all over the place really makes it a little bit hard to move on. It kind of feels stuck. I'm talking about myself partly. In my case is that I always think of something, a step, a milestone to move to another one. For instance, like if I want to be like, this is an example, if I want to be like a physician practitioner, I would want to go to nursing assistant or nursing itself and something like that, or if I want to do computer, I will just do like spreadsheet and Word first, and I'll think of going to big computer science, something like that. So it's just that I always look for something that will open to another one. I have never been going to straight to that one. This is what I'm going to do, and this is my major one. I don't know if you get my point.
No, I do. Yeah. So basically what I'm understanding is it's kind of evolving from one domain to another. Is kind of that's how you're pursuing your professional growth. Is that correct?
If you want me to tell you my story, I don't mind.
Sure, that's
Um,
fine if you're comfortable. Yeah.
yeah. So I was studying. Um, I was studying nursing, like prerequisites. I was taking all the prerequisites while I was doing nursing assistant, and then the other one was this minor nursing skills where you get blood draw, things like that. What I learned is that it took me a long time, and I did not like the profession, and because I have access to what nurses do, but it took me a long time what exactly I wanted to do. I did not have the right resource to talk to people. My communication with people was very limited, and I didn't have any idea what I was going to do. So it took me a long time. So even doing nursing, look, I was doing nursing assistant, and I was not even planning to stay in nursing. After once I do nursing, I was planning to go to pharmacy or something. So it was really painful to me, and the hard work I did was not that rewarding, I would say. So I stopped. Now I'm